Oh, that's
I hate driving. I mean, I don't really just trying to avoid driving this car.
Good morning.
okay.
Okay, Tim, everything's underway whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Just wait for everybody to sit down. So I apologise that I can't be down there this morning. I've unfortunately got a full day of meetings here in Woodhatch, but next time definitely will. I'll join you in person. I think we're going to have to sort of feel our way through this hybrid meeting. But could I just ask that if you've got a laptop on, if you could mute it, the actual speakers, and then if you're speaking, if you could make sure you speak into the microphone, because that sound quality is pretty good at that point. If I can't see your hands going up, then Ian will put something in the chat, but hopefully we'll be okay. Good morning and welcome to the Farnham board meeting on the 24th of September. Just a couple of announcements, really, just housekeeping matters in a sense. But Paula Goff, you're probably, I think, all aware now that Paula is leaving the programme team as at the end of September. For those of us that had a very pleasant afternoon the other day in Farnham, and thank you, John, for organising that. It was an opportunity to thank Paula for everything that she's done, and she's done a huge amount in terms of getting us to this point. So, Paula, we're very grateful to you for that, and I'm sure at some point we will our paths will cross again. But thank you.
I hope so. Thanks so much, Tim. Thank you.
Paula has handed over now to Elaine, who I see is in the room. And again, I think hopefully all of you have met. Okay, so I think we can move straight through to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. And there were some amendments, a couple of small points, so thank you for those. And the amended ones have been recirculated. This was the meeting on the 11th of June 2021. Can I take it that those are agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. The next item then, are any questions or queries from anybody? And I don't know that we've had any questions from the public or from members. Simon, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, Tim. Sorry, Tim. No, we haven't. So we haven't had any questions from the public or from the board members. And I guess from me now, this is a plea that in future, can we make sure that any questions that we want to ask are raised beforehand so that we can get the proper response and be prepared for that. It's something that we agreed in June, July around our communications, is that we would improve those communications by putting aside a time to respond to those questions and also ensure that we ask for those questions to be raised raised by others. So yeah, that's my plea. Please, next time round for the next board, please, if we've got any questions, can we raise those before? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There were a couple of, have been some emails from residents which we'll pick up as we go through the agenda. Right, okay, unless there's anything else on that, we'll move to item 4 then, which is the optimised infrastructure plan and the final report. Simon, are you going to introduce this or go straight to Chris?
Sorry, straight to Chris. Thanks.
Straight to Chris, thanks.
I'm myself going to swerve that and ask Alex to do it. Alex is online.
Okay, Alex, over to you then.
Morning all. Are we able to display the slide deck at all, please?
Ian, I dropped your notes in the chat. I got the slides ready, but I'm not enabled to sharing them at the moment. Are you able to share them?
Yeah, sorry, I thought they were sharing, so I just sent them. I'll just check.
Thank you.
So can I just check, you're not seeing what we're seeing at the moment then on the screen?
No, not at the moment, Ian.
Okay, so Peter, would you do the backup, please? And then I'll let you share screen. Thank you.
It's telling me the host disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, just doing that. You should be able to do it now.
That's great. That's popped up. Thank you both. So obviously, as most of you are aware, extensive consultation and comms package undertaken earlier this year in relation to the draft optimised infrastructure plan that was initially published to the public in February. The revised document has taken on board feedback from a variety of sources, both partner organisations, Surrey County Council, Waverley Borough Council and Farnham Town Council, from both councillors and officers from those 3 organisations, stakeholders. Not all are listed, but as you can see, a fairly broad spectrum from those focused on biodiversity through to architecture, cycling, and then through to the residents groups representing the diverse regions of Farnham, and then individual residents and business owners, primarily through the online consultation, but also emails through councillors and written representations. We can have the next slide, please. Off the back of that feedback, there was an extensive period of review for us to take on board all of those points. A variety of changes have been made to the amended document that was circulated prior to this meeting. That incorporates some policy additions. So those areas of policy that have been adopted since the publication of the draft OIP, removal, alteration, and addition of some of those potential schemes based on feedback received. Some textual alterations, be that clarifications, supplementary text, additional information, mapping alterations reflecting those revisions and corrections, and then some additional technical information on the potential carbon impacts, be that positive or negative, arising from some of the schemes. We have the next slide, please, Peter. So the recommendation in relation to the revised document is for the board to note the progress made in developing that final draft of the revised OIP document, taking account of initial officer feedback, and the production of the final version of the OIP awaits formal feedback from Farnham Infrastructure Programme partners, and then to approve the publication of the final version of the OIP, subject to completion of any of those final pending amendments that are just awaiting final feedback.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Are there any sort of further comments, or I think everybody's hopefully had the opportunity to input into it, but Are we comfortable to publish this final version?
Andy McLeod, Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could comment, actually, I'd like to say I'm extremely pleased with this document. Actually, it's an extremely important document. In fact, I would say it's the most important document that's been published about the future of farming for several decades, and it's exactly what's needed. And one reason I say that, actually, if people will indulge me with a short story, that it's identical, practically identical to the ideas that came out of a project team that Jeremy Hunt asked me and the other farm county councils to set up after the election in 2015. And that team included a couple of local architects, Jim Duffy and Max Lyons, and a representative of the Andrew Lodge from I'm forgetting the name of it, but the body that represents local businesses. And we came up with a set of ideas that are almost identical to the ideas that are on page 75 of this document. So I'm obviously extremely pleased about what's happening. And what I'd like to say is that what we have to do now is to sell this document to the Farnham public and then to obviously implement it. And just very briefly, in terms of selling the document, we did something rather similar several years ago, where Jim Duffy, who's one of the architects, he drew up some nice diagrams of what farming would look like if the ideas were implemented. And this went down extremely well with the Farnham public. It went into the Farnham Herald. We had a meeting with the Farnham Society, which Jeremy came along to. And then it was publicised, as I say, in the Farnham Herald. And we need to do something similar, actually. We need to produce some diagrams or some pictures that show what intensive farm would look like if this is implemented. And that's the way we have to sell it. But we also have to get on and do some things, actually. And I think we need to actually speed up, if we can, some of the early stages, some of the things that are shown in diagram on page 75. I guess that's what I want to say. I'm extremely pleased with it. I think it's actually exactly what's needed. And if we sell it correctly to the farming public, it can be implemented, and it's exactly what farming needs. Thank you, Chairman.
Many thanks, Andy. Could somebody take the slides down, please? Possible. And then I think Peter Clark, you're the next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure no one on this board, or indeed around the table, needs reminding that this is a joint council project, not forgetting Jeremy, of course. And we all appreciate the enormous effort the team have made in taking and making the final OIP a plan of consensus. It's a great body of work, and I and others that I've spoken to fully endorse it. Now that we've reached this important milestone, I would suggest that if any one member of the board now unilaterally proposes changes to the content or the timing of the OIP without the support of the council they represent, then this cannot be proper. We have consulted, and we have consulted, and we have consulted again. I'm certainly not wanting to stifle debate, but the final OIP document is welcome. So we must now focus on its delivery and not start going back over the same old ground. The town of Farnham is ready and waiting for this transformation to commence. Any further delay will not be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Completely endorse that. Catherine.
I just wanted to say that I also completely endorse the main theories of what's in the document. I have sent a couple of minor comments to the programme team, mainly around maps and how things are included, and just a couple of things in terms of areas, just clarifications. But I absolutely wholeheartedly support everything that Peter has said and Andy has said, and I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think it's a really good piece of work, and I think, you know, absolutely to both what Andy, all the speakers have said, you know, this is, you know, now is we've done the consultation. We will need to go back to residents to get sort of final confirmation of things, but this is now about getting on and delivering it. So I think I can take from the room that we're all very comfortable with this draft, or the final one, if there's a couple of tweaks to it. But other than that, we will now get on and get that ready to be published and shared with residents. So thank you for that. So we then move to item 5, which is an update on the A31 corridor. And Chris, I think that is going to be you, isn't it?
Yes, thank you very much. Let's wait for the slides. Okay, so the Farnham A31 corridor, probably just worth reminding people that the scope of it extends from the Coxbridge roundabout through Firgrove Hill, Hickley's Corner to Shepperton Flock, and also now includes the Water Lane A325 roundabout. So that's the scope of it, just as a reminder. The project objectives were set to kind of reflect the regional and the local function of the A31 corridor, and also the role it plays in terms of movement for all the different modes of travel, as well as its function as a place, if you like, sitting between the town centre, the station and South Farnham. So the objectives are to ease congestion and delays at the key junctions on the A31, to improve road safety, to improve the transport network with a particular focus on public transport, to improve walking and cycling, particularly at Hickley's Corner, but also at the other junctions as a way of, if you like, not physically bridging, but bridging the A31 and making those connections with all parts of the town. And by doing that, resolving the severance, reducing the impacts of the level crossing, facilitating development, as I've said, improving the sub-regional movement along the A31 corridor, and to address air quality issues along the corridor. If we move on to the next slide. So it's just worth me, not on the slide, but just touching on or summarising the work that's been done so far, I think. So if I was to summarise the work in the last few months, the main work streams would be developing the business case in the kind of Department for Transport format, leading to submission in November. Looking at the forecasting and developing the traffic model so that it's fit for purpose for testing the interventions along the corridor, and looking at engineering feasibility by looking at basically design and whether the interventions will fit, if you like, and what sort of land take, if any, they would have. So that's a summary of the work streams done so far. We started off from a point, I think there were 18 different interventions, maybe 19, that have been proposed by various parties in the past, I think since 2004. We've looked at those in terms of looking at the feasibility from an engineering point of view, and we've sifted them and arrived at some shortlisted interventions. Now, broadly, those focus on the Coxbridge roundabout, where the key elements are improvements to vehicular circulation, but also integrating crossings for pedestrians and cyclists. In the Hickley's Corner and Firgrove Hill area, the integrating improved connections for walking and cycling across the A31, as I've said, between the town centre, the station and South Farnham. Providing additional capacity on the A31 itself, and including improvements to station approach, around getting more flexibility in terms of how traffic approaches Farnham and relieving the traffic using the level crossing. And then turning to the Shepherd and Flock roundabout, again, a combination of improvements to vehicular circulation and integrating crossings for pedestrians and cyclists. So it's not just Hickley's Corner where we're looking to try and improve connections, it's at various locations along the A31. So if we move to the next slide, again, the recommendations are here, but I think it's worth me summarising for you what the next steps are, really. So I think ultimately the goal is to submit the business case to the Department for Transport in November. However, one of the key next steps is to hold a workshop with members of the board to show you the work we've been doing in terms of long list and short list, particularly focused on the engineering feasibility, which is the main body of work that we've done. Beyond that, then we move into a phase of what I would call looking at the operational feasibility. So that is using the traffic model to understand how these interventions would work on a day-to-day basis for vehicles, but also for the other modes of travel. And also refining and developing the suite of business case documents that we need to submit. I'll just pick up on one question I think we had on forecasting in terms of what the traffic model takes account of in terms of growth. So I can confirm that we have taken account of local schemes and developments in and around Farnham, and we have picked up sites in Hampshire, and that's all been done off a list that we've developed with Waverley Borough Council in terms of what are the committed or near certain development sites coming forward. So just to confirm that point. So in terms of recommendations then, just ask you to note that kind of progress update, and on the basis that we are planning to hold a workshop in the next couple of weeks to give you some sight of the work we've been doing and if you like, the direction of travel as far as interventions are concerned, to just approve the principle of us submitting the strategic outline business case in November. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Again, if we could take the slides down, please. And I think, Paul, did I miss you off the last item, or is it this item?
No, it's for this one, Tim.
Okay.
I'm in the room, but I've dialed into the Zoom so I can raise my hand reasonably. Two questions. One is just a practical one, I hope. You've got development lists off of Waverley. I assume you've also got development lists off of the neighbouring boroughs too. Sorry, John, you've got microphone on. To disconnect from the audio if you've got Zoom on as well. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, have you contacted the neighbouring boroughs just to get the list of near developments? Because obviously the other boroughs do impact this too. And my second question, which might be one for offline, really happy to see this as in principle being discussed. I've not been to a process where we've engaged on infrastructure with a major government department before. Once this is all done and submitted in November, could you just give us a brief outline of what actually happens then, if it's actually possible to give a brief outline of this? If not, could you follow up offline? I admit it might be so complicated that a brief explanation isn't possible. Thank you.
Okay, so I know Jonathan's on the line. Can I maybe ask Jonathan to come back on the second question if you can, and I'll answer the first one. So in terms of the capturing, if you like, all of the sites and developments within our work, yes, we have captured sites in the adjacent boroughs in Surrey as well as in Hampshire. I don't know, Jonathan, are you able to have a crack at answering the second one?
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's let's see if I can answer it because it is complex. So I'll try and make it as straightforward as possible. Obviously, it's a government investment. We need to follow the Treasury business case process for all government funded investments, and that has what we call 5 cases. And it's very important that we sort of really follow that best practice to secure the funding. So the first point is actually making a clear strategic case in terms of why the investment is needed, what problem we're trying to solve, and demonstrating how that this is consistent with government and local policies for both Surrey and for Waverley. The second point is the economic case, actually demonstrating that we deliver good value for money from the investments. Obviously, that requires a robust estimate of costs, potential costs. Obviously, recognizing that this is a very early stage in the pipeline, but also then looking at the benefits from that. From the investment in terms of how this would improve connectivity in the area, but also the wider benefits in terms of supporting the economy, supporting placemaking, and of course the environmental benefits as well. And then the other 3 cases are relating to the financial case in terms of demonstrating that we're on top of the costs and of the scheme, because obviously you'll all be aware that infrastructure does not have a good track record across the UK in terms of keeping control of costs. So obviously this will be a key role for the programme team in terms of ensuring that we have robust cost management. And then linked with that is also the procurement strategy, what we call the commercial case, making sure that we have a robust approach to procurement and getting the best possible value from the market when we obviously go out to tender for this, because obviously this is a major investment for Surrey, and therefore demonstrating that we've got commercial acumen in terms of the way that we get the right deal from the construction market. And then the final point is the delivery case, the management case, in terms of making sure that we've got the team structures are right, we have the right governance for the delivery of the schemes within that programme, and essentially we've got the right capabilities within the delivery team to ensure that this is delivered on time, to budget, and ultimately delivers the outcomes that we need for the town. Now, has that answered the question?
Yes, absolutely perfect. Thank you. I was just curious. If I may, Chair, ask one very short supplemental, and this might be asking how long a piece of string is. How long does that process roughly take, or is that completely unanswerable?
I'll sort of just answer, and then Chris can sort of add to that. There is obviously a process that we're working to. We're working to a timeline on this, with obviously the submission of what we call the strategic outline business case later this year. And we have discussed with the Department for Transport an initial timeline for that process, because clearly it isn't just a question you get the money now and then you build it. There's a complex process in terms of obviously engagement with yourselves as local leaders, but also with wider with the wider community and stakeholders. And clearly local people will be affected by this in terms of the actual scheme that's delivered, but also the changes in traffic that will occur with the solution. And then of course and related to that, there's the whole planning process. If there is a requirement for reconfiguration of the infrastructure, that will require planning processes. And of course, the statutory requirements with things like environmental impact assessment and all of that. And there is also a staged process in terms of working through the funding case with DfT. So this first stage of securing essentially is to get it into the government pipeline, but then there'll be a follow-up process in terms of what we call the outline business case, which will be based on a preferred scheme where they need to sign off the business case, and then the final stage, what we call the final business case, the full business case, is where obviously we have a preferred contractor with a firm tendered price for the scheme, and where we can essentially confirm the business case. And it's only at that point where the funding is finally signed off by the department, and then obviously construction can begin. But normally speaking, I mean, we are looking at quite an ambitious delivery program for this, and I might refer to Elaine at this point in terms of the potential timescales for the delivery.
Jonathan, may I just also ask that obviously this is going to be a while, to paraphrase. If at the appropriate time you can share the timeline you're proposing to the DFT to the board, I think that would be informative for all of us. Even if I'm sure we're not all going to consider it gospel truth.
Yeah, Peter Birch has added something in the chat. Sorry, I didn't actually have the program in front of me, but I think the current thinking is for it to be, based on the timeline that we have at the moment, is that the scheme would be in use in 2028. However, and I think that's covered in the current progress update in the papers. Obviously, there are a number of assumptions behind that, but that's the current working assumption.
And I think without being preemptive about any decision where the government are going, but I mean, this is a good example of why we've submitted an expression of interest in a county deal, so that we would have much more local control over these sorts of infrastructure projects. So if that were to go anywhere, then it may well be that some parts of that process that Jonathan's articulated, we might be able to short circuit. But we'll know hopefully a little bit more about that over the next few months. Elaine, was there anything you wanted to add before I go to Catherine?
Yes, sorry. The pro forma actually says the opening date of the scheme for the A31 is actually February 26 in our pro forma.
February 26. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think it's going to be an iterative process. So, I mean, if the team could just keep everybody sort of, up to speed as things develop, that would be helpful. Catherine, if you want to come in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris, for following up on the question I raised earlier in the week regarding the developments. It would be really helpful if that list of developments could be shared, just because that would help with communication with residents, because they do ask fairly specific questions, and me just giving a general answer, I think, guarantee will not solve the problem and will not help with buy-in. One other thing is, I can't remember, I think it was Alex or Jonathan were talking about managing, planning. One of the things that's obviously critical during these big projects is managing the construction to minimise impact during construction phase. And I didn't hear you mention that. I'm sure that's part of your planning, but it would be helpful if you could just confirm that is, because obviously, sometimes it can cost a little bit more to do something in a way that really significantly impacts on minimising impact. You wouldn't mind, Jonathan?
Yeah, if I just add a brief point there. So we've
Jonathan, can I come in actually?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
So as far as the A31 corridor, we're actually developing with the Department of Transport a much more ambitious and accelerated programme to ensure that this Farnham programme is delivered within the timescales in the OIP. We can share the pro forma of the dates, and we've also put in some dates together for consultation on this as well with our partners.
I mean, I think I'm sure the answer, Catherine, to your question will be yes. I think at this stage, though, I mean, what we need to do is get this business case into the Department of Transport. We're going to have to fight to get into the queue in any event. So I think that's the point we kind of need to focus on just at the moment. Simon?
Yeah, just to confirm to Catherine, in all of the major projects we're delivering now, we're going into design and build relationships with our contractors. This is somewhere down the line for A31 corridor yet, where we co-create the programme with the contractor using their expertise to do exactly what you said around minimising the impact on customers. So looking at the most efficient way to build, and whilst minimising that impact on traffic and on pedestrians and cyclists as well during the construction period.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other hands up. So can I take it then that we're all happy that the strategic outline business case is submitted to the Department of Transport by November 2021? Yep. Thank you very much. Good. Moving on then to item 6, which are the short and medium term interventions. Elaine, thank you.
Thank you. If I run through the short term interventions first, there's been quite a lot of activity on this, as I'm sure everyone in the town's aware. The rerouting of the HGV. So since the last Farnham board, we've consulted on the TROs regarding sign locations. The designs were reviewed by Surrey County Council design team and finalised, and Kia have been installing the signs which are due to complete in September. Onto the wayfinding strategy. A wayfinding strategy report was prepared in July, which identified existing finger post signs and new town centre pedestrian wayfinding strategy, which incorporated this sign. And we've done some new mapping consistent with those delivered in other towns in Surrey. The wayfinding strategy report was developed, so we've worked closely with our stakeholders, and this has been shared with Surrey officers, Waverley and Farnham Town Council. The feedback's now been received from all the stakeholders, and we're ready for the next stage. So we'll be discussing further the locations and the additional finger posts required, the design of the totem poles and posts, finger signs, and we'll be consulting throughout. So we're looking at a March 22 installation. On the 20 mile an hour zone, as I'm sure you're all aware, this went to committee on the 3rd of September after speed surveys, etc., and some initial designs were put forward. It was approved at the committee. However, the Waverley Heritage Officer, Farnham Town Council and Waverley councillors regarding the Castle Street element and a possible extension to the 20 mile an hour speed limit for Upper Hells to be considered. It's now had a road safety audit. This has been undertaken, and the TRO, which is the consultation period, is currently planned for October. So that's when it will start the initial 28 days statutory consultation. For the A road category reclassification, a technical note was finalised and reviewed by the partners. This has been passed over to Kia to identify the changes to the road signs and carriageway markings, no longer required for the A325 through the town centre. Kia have been commissioned and are coordinating the installation alongside the HGV restrictions. This will minimise the need for additional traffic management and thereby minimising disruption to the town. These will be made during September and very early October. On to the medium-term interventions.
Sorry, Elaine, just before you do that, can you just clarify, just go back a slide, where you say that the committee approved the measures, but then they raised issues around Castle Street and possible extension to 20 miles Upper Hell Road. Are whatever it is, are those going to be included in the TRO, or is that for separate discussion?
They have been considered, but we also, if it starts the TRO process, then we'll capture all the comments at the same time, because it's probable that actually further comments will be made for Castle Street as well.
Right, so that will be included then as,
yes.
Yeah, as part of it. Okay, thank you.
Tim, it's Ian Lynch. Can I just ask a quick question about the sign-off, in particular for the Castle Street one? The delegation from the local committee was to the local member in consultation with local councillors. In the town council's case, can that go through the town council itself? Because we don't have delegation to individual councillors, if that's acceptable.
That sounds fine to me. I mean, Elaine, there's no issue with that, is there?
Yes, that's fine, thanks.
Good.
Okay, onto the medium-term interventions. These are the longer pipeline schemes. Just to kind of bring it back, these are over 100 projects which was compiled based on stakeholder feedback. They included maintenance issues on footways, surfacing and drainage, traffic management on signage, road markings, minor improvements and highway adoptions, HGVs, planned restrictions, town centre deliveries and freight consolidation, traffic speeds, traffic calming, walking, cycling and parking and on street, buses, new services, shelters, information screens and schools to improve transport around schools. In this period, a second shift was a SIF was undertaken to further prioritise this list. It took account of funding requirements, deliverability, environmental impact, carbon impact, consultation requirements, potential for modal shift, digital technology, health and safety, and the impact on local businesses. This methodology was shared with Surrey County Council, Waverley Borough, and Farnham Town Councillors. The feedback has been received, and from Surrey County Council, Waverley, and Farnham Town Council on the 17th of September, and we're now reviewing this. We'll use this combined view to split into packages. We'll consult on each of the packages. They'll have road safety audits. We'll be reviewing the costing and funding and its potential to start in March 23. The next slide down, please. To further aid how we're going to do the next shift of these elements, there's some of these medium-term interventions fall into different brackets. As you can see, we're starting to do an interactive mapping system, which is for the whole of Farnham, which will have our partners interfaces with it as well. So we can see in certain areas how other schemes kind of interface with all these different medium-term interventions. So as you can see, it is quite busy for this 100 schemes. So we'll be sharing this. So hopefully we'll have a web page update, and we'll be having this link to this interactive mapping system, which I think would help with consultation and sort of showing how much work is actually happening within Farnham. So it is recommended to note the progress to date on both the short and medium-term interventions.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Again, can we just take the slides down, please? And are there any questions on any of that? No, I don't think so. So, fine, thank you, Elaine. I think we'll obviously have a regular update on all of that as we move forward. Right, so that then takes us to item 7. Which is a general overview of progress. And again, back to you, Elaine.
Thank you. So this is just an overview of progress to date. The final OIP was published. It's due to be published in October. The rerouting of the HGVs, the installation, is due to be completed this month. The wayfinding strategy is due to be implemented in October 22. We're currently looking at some programs of other elements, like I've said, to progress these, and the A road category has come a bit earlier, and so that is likely to be completed early October, so hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The 20-mile-an-hour zone implementation will be May 22. The medium-term intervention, so obviously there's some which can come earlier, but we'll be doing the sifting process, but the budget allocation limit will be reached in March 23. The town centre and the LC WIP, the construction phase is to be finished in January 28. However, this is a phased implementation, which may be required to kind of maximise the funding available. As discussed, the A31 corridor, we're looking at accelerating this with the Department of Transport. Currently, it's in January 28, but we're looking to accelerate this to 2026. Project 4, which is the Recklesham Relief Road, that is currently planned for February 2035 to be completed. Thank you.
Elaine, I think you said earlier that on the wayfinding signposting thing, that was March 22 rather than October 22.
Yeah, we're trying to accelerate some. So this is like the latest update. Sorry, the slides that came before me.
Okay. Thank you.
The next slide, please. There's some elements of risk, as we know. These are the top 5. We have a major risk register and opportunities, because there are opportunities available. But the key risks are modal shift isn't achieved as part of the OIP objectives. There is a possibility of a referendum. Historic street layout.
Look at me there.
We have to run it if you do. So, yeah.
There is the historic town element that we've got to consider, and there's cultural environmental sensitive sites which we have to pay attention to. And obviously we've got to control the news which is coming out to ensure that, you know, this is not a negative thing for the town, but a very positive thing for the town. So we're managing that as we speak. So as far as overviewing of progress on the next slide, it is recommended the board notes the progress update provided, notes the forecast, key activities and updated summary integrated schedule, and notes the updated project terminology now in use. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. I think this would be a convenient time to raise the measures in Downing Street in particular and the Orcas, and kind of what the options are. I mean, I've seen some of the press. There's been some comments on this and so on. So I don't know, Elaine or Simon, we've kind of raised this with you. Do you just give us some views, please?
Yeah, we've spoken with our termed contractor, and the contractor is looking at replacing the Orcas with white lining and removable bollards. So hopefully it will consider any elements which people are having trouble with. Thank you. Sorry, just to say it's next week that will start.
Okay, I mean, I think which is another temporary measure. Hopefully won't cause any, there won't be any further incidents of people tripping over them. Can you help me though, in terms of timescale for a sort of permanent, a widening of the footpath? What are we aiming for in terms of doing that?
Tim, just to update that, we have actually got some mock-up sketches of what we could do on Downing Street at the moment. This morning I cycled in from Guildford and met at the Electric Cycle Cafe, and again walked up and down Downing Street. We're going to engage with the shop owners on Downing Street around the potential to make those changes sooner rather than later. I think Elaine's got an update on potential timescales. I think we're having problems showing the mock-up of the sketches, Tim, as we speak. But we are looking at accelerating those works around Downing Street, clearly with consultation with business owners.
Okay, I mean, I think, every time we do something, there is a public reaction. I think if I can ask you all, please, to make sure that we're putting out consistent messages to residents directly or indeed through the press, and that you know the orchids will be removed and the white lines will go down and the bollards, but that is it is only a temporary measure, and you know, and Simon will update us in due course in terms of the timeline for widening the pavement. But I think it's important that you know residents understand that you know, that is the plan, and that will happen. I don't think there's been any other or similar issues in West Street, so I don't think there's any plans as there to change those.
Sorry, not at the moment, Tim.
Okay, can I ask, is everybody happy, comfortable with the proposal, Paul?
Sorry, thank you. Just a note quickly on LC width. So Michaela's also got a hand up, so I also have to have a hand up too, but yeah, the LC width, I've just confirmed both with Tom and also from reading the guidance that can be scoped down to a town level. It's not, doesn't have to be done at the local authority level. But my understanding is Waverley is looking at doing an LC width for the whole of Waverley. Are you doing that? Are you going to be working with us to make sure these things are compatible? And my other comment I will save to part 8 on referenda, as you can probably imagine.
So the next stage of the LC whip is gathering the evidence, etc., talking with our partners. So we're speaking with Waverley. The next bit would be workshopping with our partners to ensure that it's holistically looked at across the town. There is some opportunities of if the town centre is slightly later, because we want to make sure we're going once, is to ensure that we do the external outside elements first and then work into the town. So we are working with Waverley. Yeah.
And for anybody listening in, we should just explain the LC whip is the local cycling and walking implementation plan.
Tim, just to supplement that, again, I met Tom Lancaster at the Electric Cycles Cafe this morning, and we are at this minute organising a workshop in which we're ensuring that the LC whip is looked at holistically across Farnham and beyond. And then that will be phased in terms of the implementation around, as Elaine talked about, the funding. Yeah, sorry, the workshop's on Monday.
Can we just ensure that non-Farnham members are involved in those workshops then? Is it that the LC whip needs to not be Farnham?
Can't hear you, Paul, but I think.
So I'm just reinforcing the need for when we're talking about the borough-wide LC width for it to have representation from non-Farnham parts of Waverley. Certainly, I know Godalming is keen to have one too. Let's just say that.
I mean, these are all going through the local committees, aren't they? Anyway, so that would happen.
Yeah.
Okay, Michaela, I think you were.
As a retailer in Downing Street, I'd be quite willing to host a meeting of all the retailers. If you want to get together with us, give us all the details, all the diagrams, and we're going to have a large meeting and have a consultation. Okay, good. Thank you.
Could we pick that up though in the context of the local liaison forums and whether that how you know whether that's coordinated through them or done as a separate thing, Michaela? But it would be good to do. Simon.
Yeah, Tim. We were going to come to you to ask you, Michaela, actually. So that's a really good that you've volunteered to do that on Downing Street in particular.
Okay, thank you. Catherine?
Just on the issue of LC whip, I've had lots of communications recently with the Friends of Farnham Park and also the Farnham Biodiversity Group, and they're obviously keen to support the LC whip programme and understand its importance. And I would strongly request that any discussions associated with, greenfield or park related routes also include them as early stakeholders. In fact, I think they should be stakeholders from the beginning. Otherwise, we will potentially have recycle, which will not be helpful to anyone. So I would just encourage us to consider them as stakeholders. Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, Paul, did you want to raise a separate point now?
My apologies. No, I think I've got an old hand up.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, Tim, I forgot one other thing, if that's okay. Just on modal shift, I've exchanged a number of emails with Surrey officers this week regarding bus transport to local colleges. We have an ongoing issue in the town where the local buses going to local colleges are full and the children can't get onto the buses. This is resulting in parents then having to leave work, take their children to school. It's obviously not, it's not helpful from a modal shift perspective, and it's something that I know that Surrey is trying to work with Stagecoach. But I would just flag up that, achieving modal shift is about having the services available now and improving them. And I think there are definitely some areas where we need to work. And I know the HGV driver thing impacts on that, but it's also the infrastructure. But I just wanted to flag to you that that is an ongoing issue in the town, unfortunately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, as you say, you're working with the officers over that. So hopefully they'll be able to find a speedy solution.
Can I have a word?
Yeah, John, I was just going to call on.
Thank you, Tim. Just picking up on what Elaine said there. She said, you'd be bringing in some bollards and white paint and what have you. I imagine that you will be talking to the town council's workforce on that, so they can help to, make it look as smart as possible and help with, any movement of planters and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's directed at Elaine. So we'll leave that with you, Elaine. Thank you.
Yeah, I will.
Good. Good. Okay. Right. So unless there's anything else on that item, shall we go to the local liaison form updates and start with Andy?
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say, Tim, that I actually missed the meeting because I was involved with the meeting you're well aware of the members' reference group at Surrey, the Greener Futures. So I actually missed the meeting about the local liaison forum. So it'd be either John or Peter would be better to comment on this.
Okay, thank you. John, is that okay?
Yes, I'll take it. We had a relatively short meeting, so it didn't take it long to sort out. We haven't met as an LLF since March, I think it's right, where we had the 3 consultation meetings on the OIP. So we're now planning to pick them up again. And the broad idea is to have a sequence of Farnham board meetings like this, which are followed about a week later with the programme board meetings. And then there's a gap of, Farnham board meetings and a 3-week gap for the programme board meetings, and a 1-week gap to the LLF, and then there's another 8 weeks to the next board meeting. So we're falling into a sequence like that, which means that the next LLF is currently scheduled for 21st of October. So they'll be going quarterly as well. And the general idea is to have an update from the programme team and the usual discussion forum with the public. And these meetings will probably be backed up also by some other initiatives on the communications front that Ben is talking about, getting out and about in the town centre and around the town, meeting with young people and anything else that comes up along the way. So that's the broad situation, Tim. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. Good. Okay, unless there's anything else on that takes us to any other business. And I think probably we should, Jeremy, I don't know if you want to come in at this point on the referendum or public consultation and how we.
Yes, I feel referendum is a rather controversial word to use in the current political climate. So shame, I'll try and think of a euphemism, but I just wanted to make a few points. I mean, first of all, I really strongly wanted to echo what Andy said about the extraordinary progress that's been made. And I think it's really important to say that thanks to the hard work of everyone, we haven't just got some very solid plans for the future, but we actually are making progress on things that can make an immediate impact. I think the 20 mph zone, the HGV restrictions, correct me if I'm wrong, Timber, I think it's been something like 40% reduction already in HGV traffic coming into the town, which is obviously very, very good news. The reclassification of the A325, the wayfinding strategy. So there's been a lot of stuff. There's clearly the big strategic transformations that we're looking for are still being worked on. On the big highway schemes, I note that you've managed to bring forward the A31 programme by 3 years, which interestingly means that it will open before HS2. I think we should make sure that we deliver that. But unfortunately, the Repression Relief Road is still after HS2 opens. So I think it'd be a really good objective for us to try and get both those two projects open before HS2 happens. And then the Western Bypass, which is obviously a much longer term and potentially more challenging project. I personally would favour getting the feasibility done really quickly and just deciding if that is on or off the table as a group quickly. I think if it's off the table, the quicker we do it, the better, because it's something that arouses very, very strong feelings on both sides. And I wouldn't, to be honest, want to go into the public consultation about the plans with that on the table unless we were absolutely convinced it was worth having that argument over. And I just think it could overshadow the issue if we're not careful. But I think we need to do the study first before we come to that conclusion. But that would just be my point on that one. I think there are two things that we still need to do to really make sure that we get this in the place it needs. First of all, as Farnham veterans will know, there is a real risk of this becoming perhaps an unnecessarily controversial project. And the risk is really, and this is absolutely no criticism of the Surrey team, who've done a fantastic job, but this is a town that absolutely hates the sense of anything being done to it by outsiders. So the reason that the way that we're going to solve this problem is if people in Farnham really feel that this is Farnham Town Council's project every bit as much as Surrey's project. And I think that's the bit that we need to make happen. There needs to be a strong sense that this is, if we're going to do what Elaine rightly said, which is make sure this is seen as positive, not negative. And so I think it's really important that the town council are able to shape this project in a way that makes sure that they can get 150% behind it. And that's the bit which I think now needs to happen. I think a lot of this is offline, but I think it is just really important for John to make sure they can get the council into a place where everyone is giving, from whatever party, is giving the same message about support for the direction of travel. So one thought I had to do this is just slightly off-beam thought, but is could we, and Tim, would you be willing to commission Jim Duffy, the local architect, to do the pictures for the new scheme? Because Jim did the pictures for the last one, which is, as Andy said, is very similar. He's a local architect. And it was actually, Andy's absolutely right. It was putting Jim's pictures up at the public meeting that really won everyone over. And I think if Jim did a similar set of pictures for the new scheme, that would be a small thing, but I think it would potentially make a very big difference in winning people over. Then I think the final step in this process is to make sure that we have the wholehearted support of the people of Farnham for the direction of travel we're going. And I do think it would be wise to get that engagement. We know that the engagement we've had, there's been enormous effort, but we were not successful in getting as many younger people involved as we wanted. It has to be voluntary, but I think a letter through the post asking people to say yay or nay to the plans that we have collectively come up with is a really good way of getting people to actually think, yes, I do want this to happen in my town, or no, I don't. One final thing I would like to propose before we get to that stage of publishing plans and sending them out is, I understand that there are very good reasons why, as things stand at the moment, we are not proposing full pedestrianisation. And I am as aware of anyone as local MP in terms of having had loads and loads of letters, that the sensitivity about traffic jams and people getting stuck in traffic. But on the other hand, I don't want to lose the moment and lose the momentum. And I would just wonder, Tim, whether it would be possible for the traffic modelers to look at whether it is possible, feasible, to have some pedestrianisation at weekends only. And I would just like to see whether that is feasible, because the reason I say that is because, and I'm not saying which streets, whether it's all of the main ones we've been talking about or some of them, but that is how this started in both Guildford and Godalming. And they then moved from that to full pedestrianisation over, basically more than a decade in the case of both towns. But that gave time for the behaviour change to happen. Now, it may be that it's literally impossible to do this. So I'm not proposing this is included until we actually have done the traffic modelling. But the other point I would say in terms of carbon footprint and pollution reduction, it obviously would be positive if you were doing this for 2 hours, 7 days, subject to knock-on effects elsewhere in the town, and that's why we need the traffic modelling. So if it was possible to investigate that and see whether that could be part of our plans, I think that would be a worthwhile thing to do at this stage. The main thing I wanted to say was a massive thank you. I think this is, I've never seen anything like this. There is huge momentum here. I would urge friends from outside Farnham not to be disheartened by the occasional noises off. They might read in the papers. That is nothing compared to what can happen in Farnham. And we are all absolutely behind this scheme. We think it's terrific.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeremy. I've noted at least 3 points there, which we'll come back to, but let's take a couple of other comments. Paul?
Sorry. Okay, I'll just use this one for a minute. Yes, a couple of things. So referendum, and we can use other euphemisms. Plebiscite is the only one I can think of at the moment. There's another word for it, but if we do some kind of formal consultation where we're asking, I would just stress again, having spoken to my colleague Peter Clark as Deputy Leader of Waverley, we would still really only support, if there was any kind of actual referendum, that it would have to be done as a proper local authority-led referendum under those rules, which of course would be managed by Waverley, would be my understanding from the process. In terms of the points Jeremy made about the Farnham Town Council taking the lead on the vision for this, I absolutely support that. Waverley are here really to make sure Farnham is represented at that level and for the powers and scope that Waverley have in the equation. But at the end of the day, Surrey is the highways provider, and Farnham Town Council are the most local level, and certainly in both halves of the administration at Waverley, making sure the local level has the most important and most valid say in the equation is key. And we would just encourage Farnham Town Council at every stage to be very clear about their vision for what they want and taking that through their council to make that clear. I'm sure there'll be discussions between different parties and groups within Farnham Town Council, but I just think it's very important that Farnham Town Council speak with one unified voice at the end of that process and very much keep to that. The only last thing I'll say about pedestrianisation, and certainly in Godalming over the pandemic, we've had very good experience with pedestrianisation because effectively we were given a justification to trial a few things that some of us wanted to do over the longer run. My genuine concern is that in Farnham you didn't have as positive experience with the measures that were actually deployed. And my worry is that pedestrianisation at the present time might have a very significantly negative reaction just because of the most recent experience of it, which would be a shame because it actually is a really, really good thing to do in the long run. So all I'm saying here is some caution and acknowledgement of the most recent experience of pedestrianisation in Farnham would seem sensible. And very, very last point, if somebody could demonstrate, if somebody could send around the supporting evidence for the 40% reduction of HGVs, I'm not sure where that's come from. I would just like to see that, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Take John Neal first and then Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, everybody knows here that I'm keen on trying to get pedestrianisation from the place point of view. At the same time, of course, I've always recognised that it's got to be phased in. So on that basis, I support what Jeremy is proposing here. And, you know, any thoughts on how we phase this, be it weekends first and things like that, would be very welcome, I think. And I think that is a very practical proposal that we should be putting to the town council and the public, the wider public. So anything that the team here can do to help us suggest what these phases should be and the rough timescales and how it all fits together, I think will be very welcome. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Andy.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I think Jeremy's made some very useful comments, particularly his comment, the first comment about involving our local guys such as Jim Duffy, who's got a lot of commitment into this project and is very well respected and is a well respected town planner. In terms of the second suggestion, I think it's a good idea to do a study, but I would just suggest that we keep that within the project team for the moment, actually, in that the improvements suggested are going to be so good and so powerful, and they're going to go down so well. We don't want to give the impression, in my view, that what we're doing is in any way a second best type of thing. You know, that yeah, it's still within the vision of the OIP that we will move towards full pedestrianisation. But I know through the work that I mentioned the Greener Futures, the members' reference group at Surrey, I know that the amount of behaviours change that we've got to encourage people to take part in. And it will start slowly, in fact. You know, during the rest of the 1920s, it's going to be a big job to change people's behaviours, to move towards less car ownership and all the other good things that we're planning to do at Surrey and the government's planning to do. But it won't really happen in a major way, in my opinion, until the 2030s and the 2040s, and then we'll reach the nirvana of 2050, by which time all of this is solved and we don't any longer have air pollution, we have driverless cars buzzing around and all that sort of thing. So I think the vision is still there, and it's important that we retain that vision, but we don't want to actually, in my view, start in the public era, start and talk about full pedestrianisation just yet, because it would take away from the perception that what we're doing is absolutely the right thing in the short term. So I support Jeremy's idea of an assessment of it, a professional assessment of it. That's the next thing to do. I wouldn't go too public on that, actually, because it would, in my view, possibly diminish what we're currently doing, which is extremely important. And it will be terrific, actually. I mean, I can see the vision of what's on page 75 of transforming the centre of Farnham, you know, in terms of, you know, we'll have a much better environment for the, you know, shoppers, pedestrians, etc. We'll be limiting car usage. We'll have to probably redo the drivatory system so we can do that. And that's all within page 75. And that in itself is a very powerful vision. So certainly let's pursue the thing that will happen in a few more years' time. But I wouldn't go too public with it, is what I say, Jeremy.
Yes.
Could I just respond to that? I mean, I think that's very wise, Andy, and you've obviously, you know, as I have seen many of these schemes come a proper at an early stage. But could I suggest that the decision about whether to go public with it is something that we take when we've seen the study? Because I think it's too early to make a judgment. If it turns out to be feasible, we might want to, you know, strike while the iron's hot. If it turns out to be more complex and difficult, then I think your approach will be wise. But I think we should maybe ask the traffic study to be done first.
I was going to suggest we didn't go public on the study, not on the outcome. If the outcome is positive,
I think we need to find out from the team whether that's possible and how we can do that and what the quality of that data will be. And then we can decide what to do with it. But I was going to bring this all together at the end, but Elaine, did you want to come in at this point before I take Catherine?
Sorry, do you want me to answer about the modelling?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we're currently looking at the modelling at the moment with some different scenario testing. This is something we can take back to consider. So I'm quite happy because we are looking at all scenarios, so I'd like to do that. We're looking at some sort of early stakeholder engagement at the end of October with our partners. We're developing some visualizations which should help. So I agree with Jeremy, it does bring to the forefront actually how great it will look. And then we'll be going out to a public consultation spring next year. So we'll be in a good place by then to sort of see how the modelling works, what it will look like, and hopefully get some agreement between us all of how this is moving forward.
Okay, well, I'll come back to that in a minute, but first of all, Catherine, and then Peter.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that as the representative of North Farnham, which is obviously the area where most of the displaced traffic would go, the PJA presentation that we had and the discussions we had there said that if we did fully pedestrianise the town, it would displace 45 to 55% more traffic on roads that can't cope today. So I think at the moment the proposals that are on page 75 would have broad support across the town, because although there will be displaced traffic, even from this scheme, it will displace more traffic into North Farnham. It should be much less. And I would also say that having had discussions with SOFRA, which is the South Farnham Residents Association, this is also a scheme that I believe they will get behind. So the scheme that's on the table today, I think, will have broad support across the town. I know that when we close off the town centre, when we close Castle Street and various other roads on Sundays today, it does have a very significant impact on the people in North Farnham. And there are people who plan not to go out on those days because of the traffic problems that it causes in the other areas of the town. And I know that's anecdotal and I know it needs to be modelled, but I would say that the plan that's on the table today is really the first true plan that's come forward that I think will get broad support across the town. It doesn't give everybody everything they want, but it is a good compromise and it will deliver well on air quality issues. It will give a much better pedestrian experience and it will support the businesses in the town. So, I would just encourage everyone to get behind a scheme that can be supported broadly. And yes, keep the ambition of full pedestrianisation in the long term when we do have the modal shift. But just bear in mind, a lot of the traffic that we would need to get to the modal shift is not Farnham traffic. It's a much wider area. And with the developments going on in and around the town, that's a much more challenging problem to resolve. Thank you.
And I think I agree with you, Catherine. I mean, the important thing is now that we do get on with the schemes that we believe will have full public support, or a good proportion of them. But I think we mustn't lose sight of the longer term. I mean, Andy's talked about the timescale around the sort of greener futures. We've got to recognise and do recognise that 46% of carbon emissions in Surrey, and probably maybe higher even in Farnham, do come from vehicles. So our ambition, our aim is to reduce the volume of traffic generally and not simply to displace it. So I think all we're saying at this stage is that as part of this work, we should look at the modelling, and it may be that then just gets put to one side whilst we move forward with the things that we know will be supported. But I think it's an opportunity to do that at least as part of this piece of work, but completely recognise the point that you make. I'm going to take Peter Clark, and then we'll draw this to a.
Thank you, Chair. Jeremy mentioned perhaps that we should look for another word to replace referendum. Perhaps we should be looking for another word to replace pedestrianisation. But seriously, looking at, if the traffic modelling allows it, looking at how you could phase in perhaps some pilot pedestrianisation at the weekend, I would suggest that if it's done on its own, it would be perhaps seen as pointless. But if it was done at the same time as the markets, West Street Market, Farmers Market, various markets that happen in Castle Street, then it has a purpose. And I think people wouldn't see it simply as a pilot scheme for pedestrianisation. They would just see it as something that brings the community together in the centre of town. Thank you.
And that's absolutely the point, Peter, and the reason for doing it is to make it a really attractive place for people to go and shop and and enjoy farmers markets. And we're seeing those all around the county, even if it's once a month. So I think that it's certainly an ambition that we should keep hold of. But I think let's factor that into the modelling and see where that takes us. I mean, I think we've gone through this meeting with a huge degree of consensus in terms of where we're heading. So I wouldn't want to lose that. But equally, there are strong views, perhaps by both ways, in terms of pedestrianisation, park pedestrianisation, and we should at least look at that. I mean, on the 3 points I think that Jeremy raised on the visuals. Can we leave that with the team? If Jim can add to that, then that would be great. But I think maybe Atkins or whatever are already kind of onto that. But we certainly need visuals because that will bring it to life. The pedestrianisation point we have dealt with, and on the referendum. I mean, I think what the point Jeremy's making, and I completely agree with is that we do need the residents of Farnham and those people that use Farnham to be supportive of these measures. So I don't think we necessarily need to make this a completely formal process. I mean, what we want to do is to, which is what we have been doing at each stage of this, going out to residents and getting their views and feedback. And I think when we've got the sort of the final shape of the works that will be done, the interventions, then I think it is right that we go and ask residents. The local liaison forums have been really good. Those sort of focus groups, we haven't engaged as actively as we would have hoped with the younger generation, and I suspect their views on walking and cycling and so on may differ perhaps from some of the older residents, and it will be their town as much as anybody else's. So I think perhaps if we could just have a look at how that process works, but ultimately to make this a success, as we've said many times, we do need to win the hearts and minds of the residents of Farnham, and we will only do that. And to use Jeremy's words, this isn't doing it to Farnham or to the residents; it's doing it with them. So we'll find a way in which we can move that forward and hopefully get that endorsement and engagement. So I think those were the sort of the outstanding points, which then I think takes us on the agenda at least to the item 9, which is any other business. Is there anything else anybody wants to raise that we haven't covered during the course of the meeting? No, can't see any hands up. So the next meeting of this board is on the 17th of December 2021. Ian, can we assume that we can hold that at the town council again? Is that okay?
It should be fine.
Perfect, thank you. We can have a sort of an early Christmas celebration, perhaps. Okay, well, thank you all very much for your contributions, and look forward to seeing you at that next meeting, if not before. Thank you.